So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've all had a very good lunch. We're ready now for part two of the day. A very, very interesting day. So we'll start with a panel discussion, but I'll first just say welcome to this long-acting therapeutics and global health session. And I'm actually very honored to chair this session. So we'll really be shifting our focus to the broader regulatory, systemic, and programmatic factors that influence access to long-acting therapeutics, especially for the underrepresented populations that we've heard about today. So I'm going to invite our very high-level panel who will be having a discussion. And they include leaders from the US Food and Drug Administration, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, Rwanda Food and Drug Authority, FDA, Ghana Food and Drug Authority, and we'll be exploring regulatory pathways, current gaps, minimum data requirements, and clinical perspectives in enabling access to long-acting products for maternal and pediatric health. So we'll start off with a presentation from Kimberly Struble. She's joining in online. And Kimberly is a PharmD and a senior clinical team leader in the Division of Antiviral Products at the US FDA. She provides expertise in all phases of antiviral clinical drug development and leads a team responsible for the development of new products for the treatment and prevention of HIV infection, hepatitis B and C, influenza, various herpes infections, and other emerging viral infections. So Kimberly, would love to hear from you. Welcome to the floor.
Thank you for the invitation today. I've tried to listen into much of the morning. It's been a great discussion so far. So today I'm going to give the regulatory perspective on the development of long-acting antiretrovirals for children and pregnant women. But I'm going to focus on HIV because that is the division that I represent at the FDA. So I think the entire audience here knows that more timely data are needed in pediatric patients and pregnant women at the time of approval. And it's important to accomplish this goal that we have the complete prerequisite data to allow for the timely initiation of studies, both in pediatrics and pregnant women. So for pediatrics, we would need a sufficient prospect of direct benefit data that either comes from adults or animal model data. And for just initiate studies during pregnancy, we have to have the prerequisite repro tox data and general toxicology studies done. And we all don't want to rely on just post-marketing registries for dosing and safe use in pregnancy. So first, when should pediatric studies begin? As I mentioned, first we need this proof of concept from human adults or animal disease models to establish that there is a sufficient prospect of direct benefit to justify exposing children to the known and unknown risks of that intervention. And that's actually codified in our Code of Federal Regulations. But that doesn't imply or mean that the adult studies have to be completely done before we initiate pediatric studies. Rather than once we have sufficient adult or animal model data, then pediatric studies should begin without delay. But really the data necessary to establish that sufficient prospect of direct benefit to justify the risks of the administration of the various products does vary with the severity of the disease and the adequacy of the alternative treatments that are available at the time. So whether an adequate and well-controlled study in pediatrics is needed really depends on our ability to extrapolate efficacy. So for example, if the disease state is similar in pediatrics and adults, all we would need is pharmacokinetic data to show that the exposures are similar in adults and children, and then we can extrapolate the efficacy. But we do need some safety information in children. But if the disease is different in children and adults, such as RSV, then we would need those more traditional studies in children and not be able to extrapolate efficacy from adults. So I'll give a quick few considerations from the HIV experience. We typically encourage that adolescents are enrolled in adult trials. The same formulation and dosing regimen has been evaluated in adults and adolescents. And historically, we've seen minimal differences in the PK between adolescents and adult patients. So for pediatrics, from birth to less than 12 years of age, for long-acting injectables, it's great because we can use typically the same formulation across all age ranges, and we don't have to have these long delays while companies are developing a suitable formulation for the wide range of pediatric ages. And it's possible to scale the dose based on body weight and use a modeling. And we gave a great presentation today about some of the limitations and some of the unknowns information that we need to be able to have a starting dose in the pediatric population. And we do, if possible, depending on the characteristics of the product and knowing what is known about the product at the time, to encourage parallel dosing versus sequential dosing across the age and weight bands. And for some monoclonal antibodies, earlier studies had started in neonates, and you didn't need information from adolescents in 6 to 12 and 2 to 6 before you started those studies. So doing studies and during pregnancy, we asked researchers and pharmaceutical companies to plan ahead for pregnant women's participation in clinical trials. And there's two potential scenarios. And again, these are on a case-by-case basis, depending on the available data, including the non-clinical information, if it's supportive. So for women who become pregnant during a trial, it is possible to dose those individuals that they become pregnant during the study. Of course, there's reconsenting. There would be some increased safety monitoring, collection of PK, and also collection of pregnancy and infant outcome data. And we did see this with the HIV prevention trials with both cabotegravir and lenacapavir, that if a woman who became pregnant during the study was allowed to remain in that study. So that's great that we were able to get information during pregnancy at the time of approval. Also, that there is clinical trials that can specifically enroll pregnant women, such as those opportunistic PK studies in pregnant women. And this is like an ethically appropriate way to collect this information, because you identify women who are already taking the product and using the product and obtaining some PK levels. And there's no additional increase in risk to the mother and or the fetus, because this is not above her current behavioral patterns, because they've already made the decision to initiate that treatment. And of course, there's different epidemiologic studies that can be done, such as the pregnancy registries, case cohort studies, and other types of trials to gather that information. So that's all that I have today, and looking forward to hearing from the colleagues on the panel from their different regulatory agencies about what is feasible in their countries as well. So thank you.
So thank you, Kim, for that very good overview that will really give us a segue to move forward. But before you leave, just had a question from you. From the US FDA's perspective, what are the regulatory review pathways currently existing to support the development, evaluation, and implementation of long-acting formulations, especially looking at maternal and pediatric use?
So we do have several types of programs that can help facilitate the development of long-acting therapeutics. We have what we call fast-track designation, and those can help facilitate the development and expedite the review for drugs for serious conditions that have an unmet medical need. We also have what we call breakthrough therapy designation, and this again can help expedite the development and review of drugs for serious diseases for those products that can show a substantial improvement over existing therapies. We also have a priority review designation, again, for those products that are have an unmet medical need, and we can shorten the FDA review time. We also have the Pediatric Research Equity Act, which requires pediatric assessment for certain applications, particularly for new indications or new dosage forms, new dosage regimens, or routes of administration. And then we also have the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children's Act, which provides incentives for conducting these pediatric studies, which can lead to additional extending patent protection or pediatric exclusivity. So we have a combination of a wide variety of these programs that we can use to help facilitate the development of these long-acting products for serious or life-threatening conditions for both in pediatrics and during pregnancy or lactation as well.
Thank you for that. And I suppose these are things that we can actually adapt, for, the low or middle income countries. So thank you for that. Great. So I'm going to be inviting to the stage, and we'll have a session for questions later on. So please just note them down, and we'll be asking. I'll give you a chance to ask them. I'll invite the next speakers, and I think when I introduce you, please come up. So next will be Brighton Mphako. Please come to the stage. And Brighton Mphako is currently the manager in the Pharmaceutical Evaluation and Management Pre-Registration Unit within the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAHPRA. Prior to joining SAHPRA, he worked as a pharmacist at various pharmacy environments, such as retail, private hospital, and public sector hospitals. He possesses extensive knowledge in the field of medicine regulation, both locally and internationally. So welcome. Next, we have Patrick Gad Iradukunda. With a background in biomedical laboratory sciences and an MSc in clinical trials, Patrick has a solid academic foundation to discuss the implementation of long-acting therapies. He works at the Rwanda Food and Drugs Authority and is also a co-founder of the Policy Research Center, where he has a keen interest in research with a focus on strengthening access to medicines. He has currently contributed to understanding the requirements for bridging access to long-acting therapeutics in sub-Saharan Africa. So welcome, Patrick. Next, we have Nathaniel Nkrumah. Nathaniel Nkrumah is a pharmacist by profession and currently the head of vaccines and biological products at the Food and Drugs Authority, Ghana. Nathaniel has over 21 years of experience in drug regulation in Ghana, Africa, and globally, where he's an assessor on quality and clinical review of small molecules and biologics. He serves on various technical committees on marketing, authorization, and clinical review. His expertise is in sterile formulations and complex dosage forms. So you can see we have an experience from the West, South Africa, and of course, Central Africa, near to home. Okay, good. So Brighton, we want to hear about some of your experience in the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. So could you walk us through the facilitated regulatory pathways available within SAHPRA to enable the timely review and approval of long-acting therapeutics?
Thank you very much, Grace, and thanks to the organizer for the invitation. As Grace has already introduced me, my name is Mphako Brighton from South Africa Health Product Regulatory Authority. Firstly, I will just also want to put my disclaimer that I don't have any conflict of interest, and also the views expressed here are just my own views based on my experience within the agency and shouldn't be misconstrued as an advice on behalf of the authority. So just to answer your question, Grace, we have a couple of pathways in terms of facilitation of access to injectable, long-acting injectable for pediatrics and maternal health. Firstly, we do have a pathway from the WHO Collaborative Registration Procedure, the CRP, which is divided into two. So there is the pre-qualification pathway, where the WHO pre-qualify a product, and then based on the outcome from WHO pre-qualification, we then the submission is made to the agency, and we are able to review those applications and give marketing authorization within 90 working days. And within the WHO CRP, again, there is an SRA, the Stringent Regulatory Authority pathway, where if a product is already reviewed by some of the SRA, as previously known, and now the naming is being changed towards what we call WLA. So on those bases as well, through the facilitated product information introduction team within the WHO, they are able to access the assessment reports from the SRA Regulatory Authority and share with us, and we are able to also review those products within 90 working days. The second pathway we have, it's called the MAGHP, which is the Marketing Authorization for Global Health Products through Swissmedic. And it's also divided into two parts, where we have the full procedure and the light procedure. So the full procedure is where we take experts from our regulatory authority, and they review jointly with the Swissmedic assessors. And there's a platform that is provided in terms of collaborating. And at the end of the procedure, then we are able to issue marketing authorization within 90 working days. And the light procedure involves a situation where the Swissmedic has already approved the product, and we then get access to the reports. We don't get involved in jointly assessing the product. So those are some of the two, but within the African continent as well, there is a continental procedure, currently in a pilot phase, where we are reviewing through the coordination by African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, in preparation for the establishment of African Medicine Agency. And for that procedure as well, within the pilot, once the product are centrally reviewed and authorized, we are able to issue marketing authorization within 90 working days. And currently there's 5 products that have been listed through the pilot process in the continental level. We've also have what we call EMA M for All procedure, which previously used to be called Article 58, which is a procedure where, in a situation where a product might not be intended to be marketed in Europe, but EMA, through the support of CHMP, they are able to review and give an opinion. And currently there is a couple of products that are going through that pathway, where our assessors jointly work through with the CHMP and the EMA colleagues, and then after the positive opinion, those applications are able to be handled in the regulatory agencies within 90 working days. So those are some of quick facilitated procedure or fast track procedures that could be utilized. But also within the South African landscape, we have reliance mechanism which are informed through memorandum of understandings that we jointly signed with different SRA countries such as US FDA, the EMA, through the centralized procedure or decentralized procedure, or even through the mutual recognition procedure. And then we've signed those MOU, and we are able to review those products as well within some fast timelines. And also we have a procedure of priority review, and applicant is able to indicate the priority of the application, and based on that, there's a committee that make a decision whether it qualifies, and when it qualified, we able to make decision within 90 working days. I think other procedures, either partial reliance, where we rely on CEPs from EDQM or CPQs from WHO. So those are some of the pathway, Grace, that I can share with colleagues here in terms of facilitating access to this long-acting injectable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that really comprehensive response. You can see there's a whole mix of regulatory pathways, but I think they're working very well together. So moving on, it takes me to our next question, to Patrick. And this is really looking at some of the application, the actual application. So what do you see as the key regulatory gaps within sub-Saharan Africa when it comes to long-acting therapeutics? And what are some of the practical steps we can actually take to address them?
Thank you very much indeed. I also thank the organizers for inviting me and would like to acknowledge that my comment will be in the view of improvement of the community of practice and knowledge sharing and not based on my current role at Rwanda FDA. With regard to the question, what I would like to reflect back is what we have been discussing on HIV and take a step back when there were access to, there was the first approval of oral PrEPs when in 2012 at US FDA, it took 3.5 years to get the first medicine to be submitted in Africa for registration. But we have come far from that stage where with the recent approval of the oral long-acting in 2021, we got the approval in the SAHPRA within 9 months, which is a progress, but there is still some gaps as the initial application is not being submitted to the targeted market. So there is still a gap in, there is still inequality in access where we are getting the drug that would benefit most the community which reside in low and middle income countries, but we are getting the first approvals or the submission into the stringent regulatory authorities, which highlights that initially the developers are targeting those markets rather than the actual market. So moving from that, I would highlight that there are underpinning gaps in infrastructures, in knowledge, and in the brain drain, where we are still having gaps in maintaining the talents that we have in Africa. They are moving towards high-income countries due to the gaps in our infrastructure at the continent. But also, I would positively say that there is opportunity that are emerging, as Mphako has highlighted. Among the opportunity are these framework for collaboration that are in place that are fostering a way of better collaboration and ensuring that we get approvals at the right time. We get the right skills required for the continent to regulate this medicine, and through those collaborative initiatives, we believe that the future holds a lot of opportunities for early access to medicine for Africans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just a quick follow-up. I mean, we talked about brain drain. We talked about the whole issue of infrastructure. So, and you mentioned, the regional collaboration. So would you give maybe some specific areas, actually, we've seen regional collaboration actually, strengthen, whether it's capacity or harmonization or data requirements?
Thank you very much for the follow-up question. I think, as Mphako said, he highlighted a lot of regional collaboration that exists, and with either Zasbona or ESC, which are the regional collaborators, the collaboration agents that collaboration framework that are on the continent, which has been there for so long. There have been joint assessment through those regions, targeting to the burden of disease within those regions, where a joint submission could be expressed by manufacturer, and once the application is approved through that region, only 90 days are given to the authority to approve. We are having also the WHO collaborative regulatory platform, where through the CRP, WHO CRP, we are getting approval of medicine through CRP, and they are endorsed in the country within a shorter time. So through all those framework, we are getting quicker ways of getting the approvals of medicine. But recently, as Mphako was about to end, he highlighted the current pilots for the AMA process, which is being involved and would be at the continent level, and that offer more hopes on how faster we can get approval, not only through different system, but at the whole continent. And once you get an endorsement from African Union, you inform all the country you want to get approval from, and you get a quick approval. It's still under framework of operation, how it will be operationalized, but the dream is there, and it's something that excites us as regulators to see that early access would be made feasible for all Africans. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the very positive note. Earlier registration, access, it means more drugs get to our population quicker. So our last speaker for this panel session, Nathaniel Nkrumah. We've heard about the South African, we heard about East Africa, so tell us, from your experience in the West African regulatory context, what are the minimal data requirements typically expected when reviewing long-acting therapeutics for maternal and pediatric use?
Yeah, thank you very much. And just like my colleagues, I want to issue the disclaimer that my remarks and comments are my personal views and based on my experience, based on my experience working on this type of products. So my work and regulators' work is the most, I would say, easiest of all that has been discussed today. Because when the researchers have done their work, everybody has brainstormed to get a product, then we sit in our office, have your data, and assess and make decisions. Now, on that basis, for the minimum requirements, whether it is a reliance pathway, whether it's a full review, as explained by my two colleagues, we require you to submit as per the ICH format from Module 1 to Module 5. The details of the assessment by the assessors is based on the pathway for which the product was submitted. So if it's a reliance pathway, it's more of a verification process for assessors, but obviously we need to have the full set of data that you have. Based on the type of active ingredient as well, as we've discussed in the morning, and the emphasis is on already existing active ingredients, the assessors will be targeting your formulation design in terms of your release profile and kinetics, as was explained by my good friend on the innovation platforms. We also have to look at the excipients that have been used, whether they are of the right use, especially if it's for pediatrics. And like he rightly said, there are some excipients of known safety concern that has been published by EMA, and we follow similar requirements. And then based on, again, on the quality aspect, we look at your stability over that long period. Will it be stable? And like was discussed in the morning, it depends on the type of formulation, whether it is a thermolabile formulation or it can withstand high conditions. So we look at that as well. And then obviously the studies that are done between the active and your excipients on whether it is compatible. And depending on the type of route of administration, as reviewers, we are looking at compatibility between your excipient and your active ingredient, compatibility between the product and the container closure system. So if you are using a pre-filled syringe, for example, if you are using a vial, an ampoule, the complexities of compatibility move along the line of oral being less complex to when you are dealing with an ampoule, it's complex, but relatively to a vial, because you are using a rubber stopper, you have more issues on safety of rubbers and even site of administration. Now, when we come to the non-clinical, most of the products, as I've already said, are already being used in other types of dosage form. So we normally will not spend too much time looking at the data. But for the clinical aspect, as was discussed in the morning, we normally be looking at the PK and the safety studies of the formulations if it's an already existing active ingredient. What was discussed in the morning, like I said, is the most easiest part of my work because I rely on all the various research that they've done, whether it's on quality for formulation, whether the platforms, whether studies in animals, studies in humans, studies in pregnancy, or studies in pediatrics, based on the guidelines, whether ICH E11 for pediatric extrapolation, or for 21 for pregnant women. I sit in the comfort of my office, based on your hard work, and then take a decision based on applicable guidelines and standards. So that is in essence, and they're not forgetting that normally there'll be a follow-up depending on the type of product and whether we have enough data to either request for a risk management plan, which will then dovetail on the missing data that may suffice from the clinical and non-clinical studies. And sometimes, on a case-by-case basis, we may require you to give us a post-approval safety studies or post-approval efficacy studies. So that is in a nutshell what happens on that scale. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Actually, you already responded to the question I was going to ask about, how you assess the benefit, you approach the risk-benefit ratio when you don't have enough data. So thank you for that. So thank you so much for that discussion. It gives a really good overview of the application of the regulatory frameworks for long-acting therapeutics. So we have some time for some questions.
Thank you so much to the three speakers for the brilliant presentations. Again, my name is Emily Njuguna from Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm really enjoying the discussions in this room. So we've heard about the African Medicines Agency in really supporting access to key medicines within the African population. But I'd really like to get into the more granular details of what each of your organizations is doing to really harness the capacity within your own countries for local manufacturing, because that's the nexus, that's the thing that we're missing. For us to be able to ensure that we're reducing the costs to the patient, but also having these drugs readily available, we need to switch gears to local manufacturing. So I'd love to hear from the three of you, how are you supporting that process? Thank you.
Okay, maybe we can respond to that.
Thank you for a good question. I think from South African perspective, what we do, if you go to our website, there is a current policy draft that is published to support local manufacturing. And some of those products that will be manufactured locally will be given sort of a priority fast track when they submit dossier for review, which means within 90 working days to 180 will be able to make decisions. So that's in a nutshell what we are currently doing. But also from the African Medicine Agency perspective, I would say there won't be African Medicine Agency without the regulatory bodies. So a lot of resources come from the actual regulatory agency. And even within the pilot, the assessors, the committee members, it's all supported from the NRA, including the leadership team from the heads of agency in the continent. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Just to add that, so for example, back in Ghana, one of the few agencies that has a specific department that has been set up to provide industrial support for local manufacturers. So the idea is to catch them from design of concept of the GMP facilities before they even start establishing SIM. We don't want to wait when they just start building without following the guidelines. So that department follows through, but it's independent of those guys in registration or GMP. They just give them advice from how to design facilities, guide them through every stage until the facility is completed and GMP compliant. And just to add that, even on the AMA level, there's been a talk to set up a technical committee on local manufacture because of the need and the agency that African Medicines Agency sees for local partners and local manufacturers. And also, again, in most countries, they have what we call the restricted list for local manufacturing only. It's a way of encouraging companies to set up facilities in most of the African countries. So for example, in Ghana, somewhere 3 years ago, we had about 18 manufacturing facilities. But with this policy, we've now increased the number of local manufacturing facilities to about 38. Because for those products, you cannot import. It's only reserved for local manufacturers. And it's a way of increasing the leverage and the capacity of the industry, because COVID taught us a lesson that you should not rely on importation of medicines. Thank you.
And I hope we can soon also import to other countries in Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. All my colleagues have said most of the point, and what I would add is that with some of the African countries, what we could really recognize that is hindering the progress is the political will that is have been demonstrated since the past COVID-19. That's driving how investment are going into local manufacturing. And that's something we can't left behind as regulator, which we notice is making change. And for instance, in Rwanda, there has been, the BioNTech has come into Rwanda and is jointly with Senegal and Ghana. We are looking on how there will be manufacturing of key vaccines and research into malaria vaccine through that BioNTech. They have a lot of the projects that are going on, and that could not have been done without the political will. So that is the other key, which is also driving the rapid progress of the AMA process that we are seeing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Political will is surely make or break.
I'm Luisa Hering. I'm a PhD student at immunopharmacology, and I would like to know, in regards to the FDA and different regulations for pediatric patients and pregnant women, how big does the sample size has to be so it's able to be approved, the drugs, and also what kind of experiments do you have to show that they're happy with moving forward?
Yeah, just from our own experience in terms of doing clinical trials or probably maybe bioequivalent studies, ordinarily we're not encouraging them to be done in pediatric, right? So it's mainly done in healthy adult individuals, and the minimum sample size probably from 12. 12, that's the minimum sample size to probably have some statistical power in terms of the analysis. But yeah, ordinarily bioequivalence or any form of study in terms of ethical issues, we are not necessarily encouraging in pediatric. But of course, the extrapolation, as my colleagues have said, in terms of ICH E11, it can guide you in how to extrapolate from the adult study to pediatrics, as well as the ICH, I think, E21, which is currently on draft comments at the ICH, which encourage how you can do clinical study in pregnant women in terms of including them. And currently also from ICH level, there's ICH M15, which is also on a draft comment, which deals with model integrated drug development, which can help to get some of more data for such kind of patient population. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for the talk today, this afternoon. Andre Tchouatieu is my name, working for Medicines for Malaria Venture. And as you are part of African regulatory bodies, my question is mainly about, do you think we can aim to register for first registration of a new chemical entity for prevention in children with African regulatory bodies? I know recently with R21 in Ghana, you managed to do that, but it's a question that, anyway, as an African working in drug development, I've been thinking. Thank you.
Good. Africa Rise. And I think one last one. And then we can answer both.
Thank you for the informative talk. This is Rana Abutaima from Jordan, working as an assistant professor of pharmacology. So my question for Nathan, you mentioned that you might ask for post-approval safety studies. So what are the criteria to ask for these studies? And I know that when they are submitted at first, they already submit safety data. So what are these criteria that you ask post-approval safety studies for? Are they depending on pharmacovigilance reports? And when you ask for these studies, are they preclinical or clinical studies? Another question is, do you consider a waiver for LAI, long-acting injectables, or are they eligible for waiver? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's keep our responses brief.
Okay, thank you very much. So when there are limited information for a particular LAT, then, there's an unmet need, then there's definitely the need to have the product conditionally approved with the need to do the phase 4 for post-approval studies. So that's the criteria for which we'll grant an approval using that pathway. Now, on the question for my friend from MVP, the issue is that, yes, you will notice that when Ghana first approved R21, it's a lot of eyebrows. We've moved a lot on the continent to have a lot of expertise in various arms of, as I mentioned, the models of this ICH guideline. So whether it's quality, whether it's non-clinical, and it's clinical. So yes, with the AMA model, you notice that the 5 that were approved from scratch. So if you have a new drug or new chemical entity for which you want to submit, I can urge you to use that pathway because you can be assured that the decision-making will be based on whether it is the EMA platform or the FDA approach. That is what is used on the continent. So you are welcome. We encourage innovations, and please always feel free to submit it to AMA as well. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Good. And then the very last
Quick one,
yes.
With your question on biowaiver, obviously it depends on the formulation characteristics of the product. So indeed, there are mechanisms for us to apply the biowaiver in line with the ICH M9 for small molecules in terms of BCS classification class 1 and 3. But for long-acting injectable, it depends on the formulation. So the complexity of the formulation help us to decide whether there could be a possible biowaiver or you still have to do some characterization, physicochemical comparison. So yeah, it's on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that very, very rich discussion. And please, we'll be having dinner this evening. So they are there to really follow up and really get more about this real applications. So thank you, Kim, Brighton, Patrick, Nathaniel, for your very rich input and discussions. So let's give them a hand. Yes, thank you. And now I think we will be able to get to our original first speaker of the day, right, Martina? So Martina is from the WHO, World Health Organization, and she'll be speaking to us on how cross-sector partnerships can help bridge gaps and deliver impact across the full development to access pathway. So who is she? Martina Penazzato leads the Global Accelerator for Pediatric Formulations in the Research for Health Department of WHO's Science Division. She has led the pediatric HIV portfolio at WHO for almost 10 years. And in addition to providing major contributions to several guidelines and development processes, in the areas of HIV, TB, and child health. Martina has provided technical assistance to several countries in the Africa region and beyond. Over to you, Martina.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It sounds like the panel was a very rich discussion that also illustrated that important component of the end-to-end, what we call the end-to-end for novel products that is essential for actually some of the innovation that we investigate and we develop to really take it to country and make it accessible. So I'm actually glad that I'm following that. At WHO these days, we have certainly enhanced our work across the end-to-end in partnership with many of our partners and trying to address the needs of underrepresented population. And that's what I'm going to focus on in the next 10 minutes. I won't be able to touch on everything, but I will in particular circle back to some of the aspects that were brought up this morning with regards to how underrepresented population, in particular children and pregnant women, are left out of clinical studies and as a result out of innovation. And so I will just reflect on a few opportunities that we have to partner and work together to actually address some of these systemic barriers that we all have a role to play on. So I'll start with the clinical trial lens just by touching on something that hopefully many of you have already heard about, which relates to a resolution that a couple of years ago was endorsed by a number of member states and actually by the entire WHO to really support and strengthen the clinical trial ecosystem. And there was a specific mention of the need to address the underrepresented population as noting how these populations typically are not represented or represented partially in the clinical trials. And often that happens in particular in countries where the highest burden of the disease that we are investigating occur. And so as a result of that resolution, the WHO released guidance for best practices for clinical trials that for the first time include a component that specifically address underrepresented populations. And you will see if you've read the document that it does sprinkle through the document a number of considerations that are specific to women and children. However, I think for those of you, many in the room that engage and lead research in this space, you may obviously feel that some of the aspects that are included in this guidance might not go enough in depth into some of the details. And so what we're trying to do now is really build on this important piece of work and trying to see what else needs to be done to foster support and strengthen the clinical trial ecosystem that allows us to investigate innovations and novel options for children and pregnant lactating women. And so as a result of that work, there's been a framework designed to really support countries to think systematically about how to strengthen the clinical trial ecosystem. And you've heard the panel mentioning a number of tools and mechanisms that are already in place and that obviously address the regulatory angle of some of this work, but there's also work related to how to support research ethics oversights that has a specific and dedicated benchmarking tool that countries now have available, and that to some extent includes reference to underrepresented populations as well. But what we now have an opportunity to do through this framework is really ensure that underrepresented populations do not get forgotten and that they're a strong component of in-country support and in-country work that needs to happen to enable better clinical trial, high-quality clinical trials undertaken in these populations. And so as a result, WHO in April also released a global action plan for clinical trial ecosystem strengthening. And again, there is a specific action that relates to this population, acknowledging that, of course, when we talk about underrepresented population, we don't talk about children and pregnant lactating women only, but these two are certainly two populations where the community, the research community has already taken important steps. And I think that many of you in the room obviously share that leadership and that tremendous amount of work that has helped us to move forward particularly in the HIV environment, but not just in HIV. And so what we've done for the pediatric population in particular is to obviously reflect on some of the challenges that currently exist to implement better research for this population, thinking about some of the common areas of challenge that are cross-cutting across populations, but are particularly important for children and those that disproportionately affect children and pediatric research. And all of this is being summarized in a paper that was launched as part of a series of papers on this topic. And one element that, of course, has been brought up is the research capacity and how we enable a better research capacity. Now, the group has also put forward a result framework that is broadly summarized here that, again, shows some of the differences between barriers that are common across populations and barriers that are specific to children. And while for barriers that are common to populations, what we need to do is basically ensure that children are not forgotten in this space. What we can do is really mobilize specific activities that will help us to tackle the pediatric specific challenges. And the first step we decided to take was to undertake a formal research prioritization exercise, understanding that a lot of the research that is happening in this field often is driven by funders or by the pharmaceutical industry that, as we all know, often has potentially limited incentives to undertake timely research in the pediatric population. And so we felt it was important to undertake this process more systematically and rigorously and to utilize it to identify a few key questions to then trigger global and multicultural collaborations that would then build the capacity by doing the clinical trials. And of course, we acknowledge some of the challenges that require, that are more systemic, that relates to the availability of enabling policies related to ethics, funding, and regulatory on the ground. Now, I want to flag just briefly the outcome of the research prioritization exercise, because out of the top 5 questions that we identified through this modified Chinri method, what we saw is actually long-acting injectable and new formulations in general for ARVs is being considered to be a high priority. Now, of course, these priorities differ depending on the stakeholders that have responded to this, but I think this is a testimony that this area of work is something of great importance. And of course, new solutions to deliver medicines to children are not important just for HIV, but also for other diseases, as has been discussed this morning. So again, just even greater support for this type of work as we move forward. I talked about enablers because, of course, besides the well-designed clinical trials, what we need is also an enabling environment that helps us to implement it effectively. And there are a few initiatives that are now helping us to support Ethics Review Board, for example, to be a little bit more permissive and open to consider more timely inclusion of, for example, children in studies, and then also to create, again, a better environment for those studies to be implemented, but also how we strengthen the capacity on the ground. We know many of you lead through networks or direct research specific studies on the ground, and that has built a tremendous amount of expertise. But we often know that once some of these projects are completed, it's very difficult to maintain that expertise so that the next clinical trial can benefit of it. So the importance of maintaining that expertise and ensuring that that capacity strengthening continues and is not lost is something that is tremendously important, and it's something that we are continuing to advocate for. Of course, when it comes to medicines, important to flag the Global Accelerator for Pediatric Formulation as really a platform that was created for that end-to-end collaboration when it comes to pediatric medicines. As you know, we've existed for about 5 years. We have many partners that are represented in the rooms that I heard from, and CELT is obviously one of our newest partners, and that is a testimony also of the direction of travel that we currently have, because we have just launched a new strategy that I think is probably more ambitious because it really looks at multiple disease areas beyond the ones that we had originally considered. but also scopes out specific areas of collaboration where the unique role of the platform can bring expertise together and help us to advance in a more concrete manner. And the topic of pediatric formulations, certainly one, and of innovating pediatric formulations and delivery, particularly through long-acting technologies, is certainly one of great interest within the platform across disease areas. And certainly one of the core activities that we have included in particular when it comes to the product development and regulatory component of our future work over the next 5 years, where again, we will strive to align and coordinate stakeholders that all have a role to play, but also to foster that unique opportunity for collaboration when it comes to specific products and specific technologies. And I want to flag off how obviously we will do all of that in an ecosystem approach, and how, for example, the regulators that are in the room will be a critical counterpart for a lot of the work that we need to undertake over the next 5 years. We will interact with regulators, particularly through the Pediatric Regulatory Network, that if colleagues are not familiar with, is a forum where national regulators come together to discuss specifically issues related to pediatrics, and an important channel for us to engage with so that we can all foster that greater reliance, but also greater work sharing that we've heard many countries are now moving towards. This has certainly inspired a little bit of additional work on the pregnant lactating women front, building on everything that has been mentioned this morning. Shannon already talked about the work of PregLab, the work of a lot of colleagues in the HIV community. And what we wanted to do is make sure that all of that work continues and get expanded and gets taken to a global level so that the impact can be maximized. And so we have created an initially internal and now external, as well as external facing task force that will look at pregnant lactating women across disease areas, starting with defining what are the key principles of timely inclusion of pregnant lactating women in the same way the HIV and TB community have already done, but how that can be applied to disease areas where perhaps this area of work has not been looked at in detail. And then trying to generate enabling environment by working with regulators, for example, and building on tremendous step forward made through the ICH guidance that has been developed and that I heard mentioning this morning, but also with industry that does have an important role to play, as we all know here, and important to really direct their efforts, but also to support them by coordinated in collaboration across a number of parties. And certainly product development partnership, I know a few are represented in the room, are critical to this space as well. And they've been already very active, and we're already working with them quite proactively. So over the next few months, what you see from us is an opportunity to monitor a change in practice that we hope to trigger. And we will be able to use the Global Observatory hosted by WHO to see how the number of trials, including pregnant lactating women, will increase. And we think that this will be also an important tool to promote accountability. We also want to learn from, again, the HIV community by borrowing from some of the key principles that were included in the call to action that the HIV community put together with leadership from WHO and Impact, and trying to apply those principles, as I said, to other disease areas that may have not done so yet. And then, again, build on the toolkit that many of you are familiar with. Many of you have actually contributed to this work over the last few years, to build a toolkit that supports researchers that do want to include pregnant lactating women in trials sooner. They just don't know how to do that. And the toolkit provides practical guidance as well as examples and tools that can be utilized and address the various components of the research spectrum. And as I said, we will start from the HIV work, but the ultimate goal is to be able over time to tackle many disease areas that do present differences that may justify slightly different approaches, but in some cases that will have common challenges that may have important shared solutions. So we hope this will help us to advance the field, and we really think that this is an opportunity for us all to ensure that underrepresented population can really be addressed much more as we move forward with developing innovative products and in particular novel technologies such as the ones that you all concerned about. So clearly there is a window of opportunity. Lots of seeds have been planted in various parts, and we think that there is a great opportunity now to work together across the life cycle of the product. And I think that the fact that so many stakeholders are in the room is really a testimony of how that desire is felt by many of us. So definitely looking forward to work with you all. And if you're interested and you're not involved yet, just please feel free to reach out to me. We'll be happy to bring you in as needed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martina, for that really excellent overview, and just very encouraging progress, with WHO leadership to really reach this underserved population. So we'll quickly go to the final session of this afternoon, this session, and we'll have 2 presentations. And these are really 2 distinguished colleagues who will share the lessons learned from real-world long-acting therapeutic development and implementation efforts. And at the end of the presentation, we'll take some questions. So just hold on to the questions. So first we'll hear from Dr. Brenda Okware of Gilead, who will reflect on insights from Gilead's long-acting therapeutics development programs and the regulatory engagement that supported them. So I will introduce her. She's a medical doctor with specialization in public health and clinical development. She started her career in clinical practice at a pediatric infectious disease clinic, taking care of children living with HIV. She has since spent the bulk of her career in infectious disease research, initially in tuberculosis, looking at transmission dynamics of TB in social networks, its immunology, and eventually in clinical trials in new drug regimens for multi-drug resistant TB. Her focus later shifted to HIV pediatric drug development. She currently works with Gilead Science HIV Virology Clinical Development as the Pediatric Development Lead for HIV Prevention at the Pediatric Center of Excellence. Welcome, Brenda.
Thanks, Grace, and thanks for making my 50 words seem more colorful than when I wrote them. It's an honor to be here today in a room with esteemed colleagues, but also to be able to share some of the work that has been done over the years by different colleagues. Today I'm merely a mouthpiece, but it's still an honor to be able to share this work. Before I start, I should probably ask which button not to press, but just in case, I pull a more, please rush from the back to save me. So the nature of my talk today is to pick about lenacapavir and how we're able to include pregnant and lactating people in the pivotal phase 3 trials that have since led to the registration of LEN for PrEP. All right, seems to be working. All right, so where did we start? It's hard to compress a nearly 20-year-old journey into 10 minutes, but I'll try and highlight some of the key aspects. I won't go into details today, details related to results of the research, but it will be more about the how we're able to do it and how we're especially able to incorporate pregnant and lactating people in the study. So our approach towards this whole program using lenacapavir for prevention was hinged on 2 aspects. One, innovation in science, but also innovation in health equity. The innovation in science looks more at some of the aspects which you've had been spoken about before. So the nature of the molecule, the investigational drug, but also the trial design. There's another aspect of health equity, which required us to almost have foresight into what exactly we wanted to do with this compound and how we saw it being utilized by the people who needed it. So that is the aspects of health equity, a lot of which are hinged on partnerships. I had the colleague from WHO speaking about partnerships earlier, and these have been crucial in getting us to where we are today. All right, so innovation in science. Okay, I'll start with LEN. LEN is, we call it LEN where I come from. So lenacapavir is it's a first-in-class, it's an amazing molecule, right? So first-in-class and able to interfere with the HIV replication at various stages, before it integrates and even post-integration. It had high potency, but also its chemical profile made it a suitable candidate to be long-acting. It had a long half-life, and it also had a good solubility, which enabled it to be able to translate from preclinical into being a subcutaneous formulation in the clinic. Right now, it's approved for treatment in highly treatment-experienced individuals with multi-drug resistant HIV, and it was also recently approved by the US FDA for the prevention of sexually acquired HIV infection in adults and adolescents who are weighing at least 35 kilos. All right, so many of you have heard about the PAPAS programs already, but it's an umbrella of different trials, and we're striving for prevention with PAPAS. The two main registration trials were PAPAS 1 and PAPAS 2. PAPAS 1 enrolled adolescent girls, so right from the beginning, we went to include pediatric individuals, so these are adolescents. So adolescent and young girls who, from the epidemiology or the stats that you see from HIV, are already disproportionately affected by the pandemic. We also had PAPAS 2, which was looking more at men who have sex with men, so transgender, cisgender, and gender non-binary individuals. And then we had PAPAS 3, 4, and 5, and the tree might grow more branches in the future. And this was just to ensure that we have a diverse population, diverse across gender, but also across age. And at the end, it still stands on the pillars that we were looking for. So equity in access to this innovation, but also built on partnerships, built on being aware of the voice of people who would need this intervention later, having the whole program to be surrounded or person-centric, what we call person-centric, which takes into a lot of consideration the individuals who are going to be involved in the research. So this is an overview of the PAPAS 1 study. I won't go into details again. All this is publicly available, so if your brain is itching for more info, please feel free to delve into that. It is a randomized blinded cohort, and the main endpoint we're looking for was to compare the incidence of lenacapavir versus the background HIV incidence. There were 3 treatment arms, LEN injectable, and 2 orals, including the active control, which was the standard of care. But something else which we embedded in the trial design was a nested PK study looking at pregnant and lactating women. And this had more exploratory objectives. You've heard about how there's a lot unknown in pregnant and lactating individuals. So it was an exploratory study to see what we'd be able to find out in this population. Okay. Moving on, the results, 100% efficacious. Again, I won't go into detail, and this was from PAPAS 1. Let's look more at health equity. How did we make it all happen? And this is the meat, I feel, of what was the backbone to be able to include people, rather pregnant people and lactating people in PAPAS 1. There's a lot of focus on PAPAS 1 because of the population of the participants who are involved in the study. First was the firm foundation of good preclinical science, so things which showed that whatever we're going to give these individuals or these participants was safe. And this was both for the oral intervention as well as from preclinical work for LEN. The voice of the people is quite important. The engagement with different groups, including a global a global CAB helped to inform the design of the study. And it was clear from some of the individuals who are involved in this CAB, that is adolescents who were pregnant at that time, how they felt that it was crucial for them to be included in such a trial. There was a lot of winning over hearts and minds, and winning over hearts and minds was more about causing a whole shift in how we approach pregnancy within the clinical trials. This particular slide borrows some of the work that was done by the Phases Working Group, but there have been other experts in this area, some represented in the room as well, who have done a lot of work in trying to change the way we think about pregnant and lactating people, to look at them more like a complex population versus a vulnerable population, looking at aspects to protect them through research instead of from research, and lastly, to just provide a way to have inclusion in an equitable manner versus it being an obvious presumptive exclusion. Across the different studies, Purpose 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of them try to emphasize having reproductive choices for all the individuals. So contraceptives were provided but not mandatory. When one became pregnant, they were reconsented and they had the choice to either continue in the blinded phase or, either continue in the blinded phase or opt out. This shows how, in terms of the trial design, we're able to capture the key pregnancy data. The main objective was not to make the trial more tedious or more exhausting or more laborious, one for the sites who are involved, but also for the participants who were involved. So we utilized the different already existing PK time points to have them as maternal PK draws as well. We also gave the options to opt in or out to have additional breast milk and infant samples collected. And again, we worked with sites who are experienced in taking care of complex pregnancies and lactating individuals. This data was presented earlier, so I will not go into the detail. By the time of the primary analysis, we had 510 pregnancies, but that number has since increased because, this was back last year. So there are more pregnancies and more pregnancies which have come to completion. So there is a lot more data than is shown here. But what was surprising was even after many of the pregnant people found out that they were with child, they chose to continue participation in the trial. So this is my last slide, just to help give a sense of where we are right now. The talk was supposed to be lessons learned. I think the main lesson is it's possible within the confines of a well-guarded framework within which there will be no undue burden as well as no additional risk to the pregnant individuals and the lactating people. So we, like I said before, continue to follow all the pregnancies to completion. We've been able to get a lot of PK data, which will be presented at later conferences. I think the next one is IAS in July. This will be in Rwanda, and where we'll be able to give more light on the observed PK that we saw with these pregnant and lactating women. There are some good comparisons between the breast milk and the plasma ratio. And then overall, it has helped us further build the population PK models that we have to be able to give more insight into what exactly happens with the drug concentration in pregnant and lactating people. So that's my summary of the 20-year-old story. And again, I acknowledge all the people who have done the work before, during, after, and there's a lot more that is going on. So that's the story for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you for introducing us to Len. I have a relationship already. And the exciting progress, the exciting results from this study. So our next speaker is Andre, I will not try and pronounce the second name, Andre of Medicines for Malaria Venture, MMV, who will present on the potential real-world impact of long-acting therapeutics, drawing from the malaria field as a case study. Come up. Andre is a medical doctor who completed his studies at the University of Burundi. After working as a local field doctor for MSF France in Burundi, he joined Sanofi, where he spent 12 years serving in various roles as country representative in Burundi, medical advisor for Eastern Africa in Kenya, and later as senior medical manager for malaria within the Corporate Social Responsibility Division in France. His current role is to lead activities that help increase access to high-quality antimalarial drugs for populations in malaria endemic countries. Andre, welcome. Give us this real-life experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There've been a lot said today about HIV, a bit about tuberculosis, not much about malaria. Mainly because in the long-acting therapeutic experience in malaria is kind of in a starting point. So what I'm going to present today is not really about experience, but about what we are projecting for the future on the access perspective, and what are the gaps that can be filled if finally the product that we are developing or the combination that we are developing comes to be successful. So all that hope will be presented here. So malaria as an acute illness definitely will not be eligible for treatment for long-acting. So the positioning for long-acting in malaria is mainly in prevention, protection. So the positioning clearly as a strategic and target population, anyway, we all know that malaria is affecting most children. So far, there have been a lot done in children below 5 years of age. But as we look through data in countries, there's a slight shift towards the older age group. So definitely we need to consider those, and there is not much that is being done for those children. The epidemiological settings, we have perennial transmission, and also seasonal transmission. These are the settings that we are targeting. In terms of the product profile and development, we are targeting 3 to 6 months protection with the long-acting combination that we are working on, with a high potency and safe for G6PD. We know that G6PD deficient individuals, can be a problem when dealing with some of the antimalarials. This product will represent the advantage of not having a cold chain, not necessitate a cold chain for transportation, for storage, with a low cost and easy administration through an IM injection. The comparative positioning with the vaccine, the monoclonals that are being developed today, we are expecting to be complementary initially. But considering the funding landscape today and considering that the average cost of these new tools, vaccine, monoclonals, and so on, there is a possibility, and considering also the potency and the profile of the combination, there is potential to displace the vaccines, to displace the monoclonals. It will be cost effective, we hope so. Scalable, knowing that we'll be learning a lot from what is being done now with the implementation of the vaccines, which is the first preventive tool for malaria. We are learning a lot from the implementation of the vaccine to project the scalable level of this long-acting injectable. And there is a long-lasting alternative, since we believe that by combining the two molecules that we are working on, we can really push to the latest the occurrence of resistance. In terms of market research and acceptability, we have performed some studies in 6 African countries on preferences and feasibility. So to address one of the questions about the fear of children about injections, it's true that for children it's difficult. But when you do interrogate the health workers, the moms, and so on, they believe that an injectable, compared to what is available today, an injectable option for prevention of malaria could be very well acceptable and feasible. And this gave us insights to guide the product design and deployment. So the development status, today we are at the stage of first-in-human study. They are ongoing. For one of the compound, it's been ongoing since 2024 here in the UK. And for the second one, it's supposed to be starting end of this month, we are in July, end of July. So everything is in place for that. And since this is involving a complete new chemical entity and a drug that is more known, and positioning for first registration, first a new chemical entity in prevention, so targeting a large scale, considering the risk-benefit assessment, we are permanently engaged with the regulatory authorities, mainly with MHRA, since the first study is done on the UK soil. So these are, and there is a safety board that is up and working with us about this. So these are this just to show the potential in terms of prevention that that the drug can be positioned on. So in infants, we have today we have perennial chemoprevention. Infant and children, we have seasonal malaria chemoprevention. Then we have in pregnancy and let's say coinciding with also prevention in IPT in school children, we have that space there with women of childbearing potential that needs to be considered. So that has implication on the safety signals that we should look for. We have the pregnant women in second and third trimester of pregnancy that needs to be targeted as well. And we have the travelers. Then there is another indication down here, which is PDMC, that was lately recognized and considered for guidelines by WHO for children that are hospitalized with anemia, and then they need a children living in endemic countries, malaria endemic countries, hospitalized with severe malaria, to cover them against malaria, to give them time to recover from the anemia, being protected from malaria. So when we look at the pipeline for prevention options, we have the oral standard of care, the vaccine, the monoclonal antibodies. Then we have the long-acting injectable, the long-acting injectables here. And this just to show that compared to the monoclonal antibodies, for example, they have an activity on both the blood stage and the blood stage and the liver stage, which makes a huge difference compared to the monoclonals, for example, which have activities only on the liver stage, meaning that at any point when you meet a child in endemic countries, he can get all the steps of the malaria cycle in the body, and you could be able to tackle all those sites. So the monoclonals, for example, when you use them, you might have to give some ACTs, for example, to target the blood stage because the activities is just at the liver stage. So this is one of the reasons we have a lot of hope with this formulation. So at this point, MMV 371, I saw that in one of the slides here. We are combining it with MMV 055. They are targeting both the cytochrome BC1, but on different sites, so the complementarity. We expect no cross-resistance. Synergy has been observed in vitro, and there is a low risk of clinical relevance pharmacokinetic interactions. So the value proposition in chemoprevention, I think I mentioned them. Prevention in children 5 to 15 years old, because today there is really nothing there. In children 3 months to 5 years in perennial and seasonal settings. In pregnancy, we are positioning as well community-wide prevention for mass drug administration, which is a route to elimination. And then in prophylaxis with casual travelers, people traveling in endemic areas. In this last category of travelers, there are two categories: the short-term travelers and the long-term travelers, and I think both of them can be covered depending on the dose ratio, and we are expecting about 90, 95, 98 protective efficacy. So I just want to illustrate, because of the time, maybe just the case of seasonal malaria chemoprevention. I'll go back and just, this is the profile of the transmission in seasonal settings. So we have a big peak that is occurring, let's say, towards the last half of the year. And what today is being done with sulfadoxine amiodarquine and sulfadoxine pyrimethamine amiodarquine is to give one dose starting at the beginning of the peak, a second one, a third one, and a fourth one. So that was the basic at the beginning. Then some countries are considering either adding one dose at the beginning of the peak before it goes up, or so the basic was 4, and today countries are considering adding a 5th one. And by adding that fifth one, you can get 50% more reduction in malaria cases. So if on this we apply along, let's say, the basic minimum criteria, 3 months protection, that will need 2 injections, and we are covered. If we consider all the logistic that is around SMC, mobilizing the community health workers, going door to door, and so on, and knowing that the coverage, the efficacy, the cost effectiveness of SMC starts from 60% coverage of the entire target population, then there is a lot of resources being considered. And if we can mobilize health workers, qualified health workers, just twice in the year instead of 4 or 5 times during the year, I think they could be, and we are also very sure of the adherence, knowing that SP and amiodarquine is 3-day treatment, and the community health workers, they go through houses just once, they observe the first dose, and there is no guarantee of the second and the third dose. So I think I'll stop just here. I think the slides will be distributed. The rest of the slides are just examples of various use cases that can be considered for long-acting injectable in malaria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andre, for those very exciting potential of what's ahead. You can imagine addressing malaria, what it can do to, many of us in the malaria endemic regions, and its impact on, health, maternal child health, and the whole population. So we are not doing too good with time. We have a breakout session later on after the tea break, but we'll just take one question for Brenda and one question for Andre.
Thank you so much, both of you, Andre and Brenda, for your presentation. My name is Mili Karina from Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm passionate about maternal and child health. I'm a nurse midwife and a board-certified lactation consultant. So I loved what you said, Brenda, that you want to move from, what did you say? You want to move from doing research on women, but you actually want to walk them through the research, because we tend to focus a lot on data. So my question to you is, how do you plan on doing this? Maybe some practical steps on how you're going to support these women through the research and not just doing research on them.
All right, good question. It's actually,
okay. Yes.
All right.
It's actually what we're doing right now within the company. It starts from almost being active in terms of choosing to involve women in research. From the PURPOSE program, right from the beginning, that was the decision. We're going to have the pregnant women and lactating individuals in the studies, but that feedback came from engagement with groups like global community advisory groups. Having that early on insight into the people we knew would benefit from this innovation helped us design the study, helped us take into account the considerations, helped us, also gave us that reassurance that there is indeed an unmet medical need, even if sometimes the need looks a little bit ugly, because no one wants to know that somewhere in some part of the world there's a 16-year-old girl who actually is going to get pregnant. By being able to have that option to protect herself early on and to be able to make that decision, but also even after she makes that decision, being able to have it available when she goes to the healthcare center, all that is crucial. For the PURPOSE program, there's been a lot of engagement with communities outside science. We cannot neglect the science because we have to make sure that everything is safe, right, and make sure it works. So it's about marrying the science with the people who you intend the innovation to be for. And you continue learning. Even now, after the approval, there is still that continuous engagement with the different groups, especially from the community advisory groups, to be able to guide and be like our pulse check on the ground, like what exactly is happening where we hope to make this intervention available. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. From an SBC practitioner, my heart is content. Thank you.
So I was going to ask about the chemo prevention. So you've clearly got 2 products in the works. Do you have plans to make that into a single injection, or do you intend to continue as 2 separate injections for chemo preventative?
Yes, for practical purposes, we are looking forward to have a single injection. For the time being, is the CMC people are discussing how to do that. It might be a dual vial, then, but we are aiming for a single injection. As we speak, the CMC are still working on it. The first in human are done separately, so they have the time to get to a formulation that will be when we'll need to have maybe getting in phase 2, phase 3, then we'll have the product ready. But the aim is that one single injection with both products.
Thank you for that, Andre. And remember, we have the group work later, and then of course it's dinner. So thank you very much, Brenda and Andre. Thank you very much to all the speakers this afternoon, and also the audience for your insightful and really engaging discussion and questions, and just the whole engagement has been very good. So today's discussion has reinforced the critical role of regulatory science and multi-sector collaboration in unlocking the full potential of long-lasting therapeutics, especially for women and children in underserved settings. As we move forward, let's continue to prioritize regulatory harmonization, evidence creation and generation, and equity-focused partnerships that will enable timely and safe access to these innovations where they are needed most. So thank you once again, and we look forward to this engagement and collaboration as the day goes and even after this session. So thank you.